Phineas Gage, born in 1823, was an American railroad construction foreman. He was, according to his peers, a hard-working, efficient working-class man with a balanced mind. All in all, a regular person. One day, in the year of 1848, he was preparing a hole for blasting. He was in the middle of tamping the powder before putting sand on it. He began to strike the powder, and when he was about to strike again, he had turned to look at his men. He struck again, and this time the tamping iron came into contact with the rock and caused the powder to explode. The force of the blow forced the iron into the left side of his face and through his head. When Dr. John M. Harlow eventually examined him later that day, Gage was exhausted. Blood from his internal injuries was making its way into his stomach, which he vomited out frequently. After the rod had been removed and Gage was sufficiently bandaged, he remained hospitalized. Here are some documented entries from Dr. Harlow himself. 10 p.m., same evening. The dressings are saturated with blood. The hemorrhage seems to be abating. Has vomited twice only since being dressed. Says he does not wish to see his friends, as he shall be back at work in a day or two. Tells where they live, their names, etc. Pulse, 65. 14th, 7 a.m. Has slept some. Appears to be in pain. Speaks with difficulty. Tumefaction of the face considerable and increasing. Pulse 70. Knows his friends and is rational. Asks who the foreman is in his pit. Hemorrhage internally continues slightly. Has not vomited since 12 p.m. As Gage's recovery continued, Harlow continued documenting his progress. Eventually, he recovered completely, and he was able to continue living a regular life again. However, not all was well. Those closest to Gage noticed a radical change in his behaviour. Where once he was a disciplined and kind, hard-working railroad foreman, he was now incredibly impulsive, unable to regulate his own behaviour, and became a slave to his most base impulses. He became capricious, often prone to sudden changes of mood. He became insensitive, lacking respect in serious situations. He would also engage in profanity, which was not like him previously. What was once a hard-working, everyday, working-class man was now a capricious, insensitive, and recklessly impulsive individual. He was no longer the man his friends and family knew him to be. But how, exactly, had his behaviour changed so radically? To investigate this, we must look at the nature of Gage's injury. The rod pierced underneath Gage's left cheek, upward through the left frontal lobe of his brain and out through the top of his head, completely destroying the optic nerve connecting the left eye to the brain, rendering him completely blind in his left eye. The frontal lobes have many functions. Chief among them are higher executive functions such as problem solving, as well as the regulation of social and sexual behaviour and the inhibition of impulses. Using modern computer technology, researchers have posited that the iron rod would have passed through the prefrontal and orbitofrontal cortices in the left hemisphere, the first of which is primarily responsible for higher executive functions, such as behavior regulation, impulse control, attention, and other metacognitive processes, the second of which is thought to play a role in decision-making and emotions. In other words, being able to think things through and analyze one's own thoughts. Because of the severity of Gage's injury, he no longer had the capacity to think through his actions, nor restrain his impulses. This would explain his socially undesirable behaviour. In 1852, Gage eventually went to work on as a long-distance stagecoach driver in Chile, before his health began to decline in the later half of the decade. He went back to San Francisco, and was taken care of by his mother and sister. In 1860, he began to suffer from frequent seizures, which affected his ability to hold down a job. Unfortunately, he died of his seizures, and was buried at Lone Mountain Cemetery in San Francisco. While Gage's story is a tragic one, it laid down the foundations for the understanding of the relationship between the physical condition of the brain and how it affects behaviour.